Hi guys, and welcome back to another F1 Fanatics video. Got a bit of a different video for you here today. So after their double retirement in the British Grand Prix, we're going to look at what is going wrong at Haas. After looking a promising team within the sport last year that was competing well within the midfield and starting off the season being the fourth quickest car and being really high up in that midfield battle, they've slowly throughout the season just drifted towards the back end of that battle and sometimes even losing in a race to the likes of Williams, who we know are in a dire state and are really in a kind of rebuild phase at the moment. So what we're going to basically do in this video is going to go back and look at Haas results through the season so far. We're mainly going to look at their race finishes because actually on a Saturday they haven't been bad and they've got a good car, but it's actually converting that qualifying pace into race pace and getting good results, because at the end of the day, like with any sport, it's a results business, and race day is where you kind of make your money and you earn your bucks. And at the moment, it's going all wrong for Haas on race day. So, like I said, last weekend was their first double retirement since Australia 2018, and it's been bizarre off the track with kind of this PR shambles with the sponsor Rich Energy, which has come out and it's now changed its name to Lightning Volt. So that's all confusing in there, but that is a chaos around the team that's not needed when the on-track performances are also not going their way as well. But a little bit more on that later on in the video. So let's go back to Australia and how the season started. And the season started actually very positively for Haas. Magnussen finished 6th in Australia after a good qualifying performance, and so was best of the rest in that midfield pack, which, you know, obviously was good. Grosjean did have to retire in that race as well, but that was forced to with a damaged wheel nut when he had a particularly slow pit stop. But after that result, I don't think any of us were kind of going to see what would transpire in the races to come. So Australia was kind of really the peak for Haas this season. That was their best race, and then it's been a slow and steady decline from beyond that. So in the second race of the season, Magnussen was way off the pace and he finished 13th. And again, Grosjean was forced to retire after collision with Stroll on the first lap at turn 2, and then he damaged his car, which damaged his car, and then he had to retire on lap 16. So then obviously another race where Grosjean's car didn't get round and didn't provide that valuable race data for the team. And in the race, for the points perspective, Magnussen finished outside of those points. The Chinese Grand Prix, it was good for Grosjean personally because he actually finished a race, which obviously at that stage, having retired in the first 2 races, must have been a bit of a relief for him and felt like that was going to be the kickstart of his season. But both of them really struggled in the race for race pace, and they both finished outside the points, with Grosjean 11th, so just outside the points, and then Magnussen finishing 13th again. Moving on to the Azerbaijan Grand Prix. 13 was starting to look like it was becoming Magnussen's favourite number because it was his 3rd consecutive finish there. So a 3rd consecutive finish outside the points, which obviously is not great and not where Haas want to be. And again, after having that race back, finishing, getting round, it was another DNF for Grosjean, which then made that his 3rd retirement out of 4 races, which This one was due to a brake problem. So in fairness, you're looking in, all three aren't Grosjean's fault, but they're all three reliability issues. I mean, yeah, unlucky for Grosjean, but also just having only one race out of the first four where both cars finished. In a small team like Haas, where getting race data is so important to kind of staying on top of things, that kind of reliability issues are starting to become a real problem for them, and I think is obviously part of the reason why things have started to go so bad for them. Then after Azerbaijan, so yeah, as Azerbaijan obviously had Magnussen finished 13 and Grosjean retired. After Azerbaijan was in Barcelona, and this was actually their best constructors points total for the season so far, because Magnussen finished 7th and then Grosjean finished 10th in the race. But it couldn't just be a nice points finish for Haas, could it, with this season and how their luck's been? This was actually the first incident between Magnussen and Grosjean where there was a late safety car in the race, and then when things got restarted, the Haas were both running 7th and 8th at that time in the race, and then they clashed. Magnussen was 7th, Grosjean was the one in 8th, trying to get forward to 7th, and yeah, they made contact, and this resulted in Grosjean slipping from 8th to 10th, and that is where he would finish. Günther Steiner, his team principal, said they had a meeting post-race immediately to clear the air, but he made his view very clear that yes, race, yes, push the car to the limits, but hitting each other and colliding with each other is unacceptable, and it's unacceptable for the team because it compromises the team, and they're not a team, no team in the F1 grid can afford for their drivers to be taking each other out, but especially obviously Haas, one of the smaller teams on the grid. It's just kind of devastating when that type of thing happened, and obviously it was lucky this time it didn't take either of them out of the race, but you know, it's something that Günther Steiner was clearly very unhappy about, and rightly so, and wanted to make it clear to the drivers. Moving on to Monaco now. Monaco saw Haas score points again. Grosjean starting in 13th and then finished in 10th. So that was a nice strong race for him. He actually managed his tyres really well within that race. I think at one point he was actually 5th before having to later pit for tyre changes. But he drove a really good race in Monaco. That was actually probably Grosjean's best race of the season to date. But again, there were major race issues, race pace issues for Magnussen. He had a very strong qualifying. He started 5th on the grid, and he finished the race outside of the points in 14th, which, you know, that is quite a drop off, and probably really emphasises that point that the Haas car is a quick car. It's a well-designed car, and, you know, it's got potential to be competing in that midfield, but just for whatever reason, they cannot translate that qualifying pace into its race pace, and therefore they were starting to get results like that, where they were qualifying. Magnussen has been good at qualifying into Q3, but hasn't been able to put that consistency in the race. That was also where they saw their first update in Spain, and we're going to see that the update, which you hope kind of improves your car and improves the performances in the races, actually really kind of compounded their difficulties and made the car worse than what it was actually performing at before. So in Canada, the Haas was well off the pace, Grosjean finished 14th and Magnussen 17th, but at least it was a second successive double car finish for them, which was the first time they'd managed to do that this season. But Magnussen was 17th behind Williams' George Russell. So considering how poor Williams are and in terms of how far their car is off the pace, that was a really disappointing, the first really disappointing race performance for Haas. But, you know, like I said, that was disappointing. Surely it can't get worse, which is probably what Haas were thinking at every weekend before that. And then the French Grand Prix happened. As well as being an incredibly dull race for everyone watching, and obviously a lot of things came out, it was also what Günther Steiner described post-race as the worst weekend in the 4-year Formula One history of Haas. I mean, that is pretty damning stuff, because basically Haas did not compete all weekend. I think Magnussen only was 17th, and he was only ahead of the two Williams, and Grosjean again with another DNF. He was forced to retire 9 laps from the end. Again, nothing particularly to his fault, probably really frustrating for him and the team, because every time a car doesn't finish and complete that kind of race with reliability issues, that's more data that they lose, and that's more data that they've lost to try and pinpoint the problems that they're having. So it's becoming a real problem for them. Austria was no better really for Haas. After Magnussen qualified 10th and Grosjean 11th, both kind of slipped back from through the field. So again, having that lack of race pace on the Sunday and just not being able to compete with their fellow midfield contenders. Grosjean finished the race 16th and Magnussen finished 18th. After kind of serving a drive-through penalty for moving before the start signal. This left him behind Russell, and this is also where the off-field track stuff started to kind of go really badly as well, because then a statement came out from Rich Energy saying they revoked their sponsorship deal on a performance basis, in terms of they were really disappointed with how the Haas team were performing in the races, and so they were stopping their sponsorship deal. And then there was the sponsorship wasn't revoked, and it's been completely carnage. I don't know if anyone really actually truly knows what's going on with that. And with the current latest statement came out is William Stockley was removed from the business, and they've changed now to Lightning Volt. But yeah, chaos, and it started a week, probably the worst week in Haas's F1 history, leading us to the British Grand Prix weekend, which we've just had. And I would say this is rock bottom for Haas. I mean, if you could ask, could anything else go wrong? This was probably there. What else could go wrong? So carnage off the track, with unsure in the sponsorship deal whether they still have a sponsor, whether they do not. It just looks terrible for the running of the team, because if they were dropped by Twitter, that's incredibly unprofessional in terms of that, in terms of slating the team as well, which was crazy. And after being Grosjean in free practice, managed to spin on the exit of the pit lane, and he lost his front nose, and then had to drive around the lap because he couldn't reverse back into the pits. And then when he came out for another lap later on, he spun out, and it was just, it was crazy. And it just summed up how it was going to go in the race, because from the start, Magnussen was 16th and Grosjean was 15th. They were racing wheel to wheel all the way around, and then at the pinnacle of turn 5, both cars made contact with each other. It didn't necessarily look too much. I mean, me and Ash spoke about it. It wasn't like it was a big crash and they kind of smashed each other into a wall. They just kind of seemed to aggressively touch tyres, and that was enough actually to damage both cars beyond repair, and they both had to retire, I think, on lap 8 and lap 10 respectively, which, yeah, Günther Steiner was furious about. Like, as a team principal, he's usually quite relaxed, he's good in front of the media, he speaks well, he generally tends to keep his head, but he had lost it. He was fuming, and rightly so. I mean, the results have been poor. I bet the team are working so hard behind the scenes trying to figure anything out. They've had all this carnage in the week with rich energy, and then come to race day, they desperately needed just a really good race performance, and then their two drivers do that. And he described it as all the drivers brought to the weekend was a shovel to dig a hole they are in even deeper. I mean, that is pretty damning statement about your drivers. And, you know, he has every right to be angry, because it was really poor from Magnussen and Grosjean to be involved in a collision like that at this time. I mean, obviously racing incidents happen, but with everything going on with the team, it was so stupid from both of them. And there we go. That is where we're currently up to in Grand Prix races, of how poor this season has been for Haas. So what are the main issues? Why has this happened? Why has one of the most promising kind of midfield teams from last season suddenly dropped off a cliff in terms of performance? Well, the tyres that obviously Ferrari have complained about in terms of performance, Haas again have really struggled to get performance out of these tyres. They've managed to do it well in one lap pace, but in terms of consistency over the race, they have really struggled, and they've not been able to get any sort of decent performance out of this car, bar Australia and bar Barcelona with its own problems. And so the tyres is the main issue, and with a small team like Haas, they don't necessarily have the manpower on the ground in the factories to kind of go through all the data and pinpoint the problem quickly enough. So that also means that they're slow to kind of fix problems, because they just don't have that manpower to analyze that data. The second main issue for me is the DNFs, because collecting data to improve your car is so important on race day. You only get one day every kind of 2 weeks, or 1 week if it's back-to-back Grand Prix, to kind of really collate good in-depth data to kind of see where your car is compared to its opponents, where you can kind of improve those extra tenths and then trial them at the next practice. And the British Grand Prix DNS was the double whammy. The real big failure for them was because, you know, they have a big update due for Germany, and that was going to be, they were running some systems in the race, and that was going to be where they were going to collate a lot of data that they could then take back to the factory in these 2 weeks in the build up to the German Grand Prix, and they could feel ready to kind of maximize this update to hopefully get their performance back, performing and challenging within that midfield. But now they only have the limited amount of data that they would have been able to collect on the Friday, and so they're going in pretty blind with this update in Germany. And I think that is the real reason why Günther Steiner was just so furious with his drivers, because not only does it affect them in the British Grand Prix, it affects them in the German Grand Prix, and really all the hard work the people at Haas are doing into that update. It means that we might not realistically, they might get it right, they might nail it in Germany, but realistically we're probably not going to see the benefits of this until Hungary, the race after, which really frustrating because Haas are in desperate need of a positive weekend, really. And then the last one for me is the drivers themselves. I mean, the chemistry between the two is just not good. I mean, they're not rookies. Grosjean's had over 150 starts in F1, and Magnussen is, I think is his third or his fourth full season in Formula One now. Like, these aren't rookie guys, and when your team needs you and to kind of step up and make sure that you're collating the data for the team, having that crash at Silverstone and their collision in Barcelona as well, it just proves that they're being stupid. They're not putting the team first. They're putting their own needs first, and that is really frustrating as a team. And for whatever reason, they're clearly not working as a pair. You can see the benefits of a really good pair in the Lando Norris Carlos Sainz one at McLaren, and they are getting the best out of it, and it's pushed McLaren to the top of that midfield battlefield. And then you see the consequences of a bad partnership in Grosjean and Magnussen, where they are right at the back with Williams, and Williams is just because their car, they just got the design wrong. They went for a new thing, and Haas realistically, and the speed that they have in that Haas car should be well in front of Williams, not being right at the back with them. And so I realistically think that this is probably going to be the last time we see the Grosjean and Magnussen partnership in a Haas car. I cannot see them staying with this lineup into 2020. And as it stands with the DNFs, you got to say that it's probably Grosjean who will lose his seat, because although when he's there in a race, he does have natural pace, too many times he just doesn't finish races, and that is killer for a team like Haas. And I think his luck is probably drawn out. He may go to another team. We might see it might work out for him, but I think his time at Haas come the end of the season may be done. Maybe I'm being a bit harsh, but that's what I kind of feel. And at the very least, these drivers need to be consistently finishing like Williams, because Williams have finished with George Russell and Robert Kubica every single race they finished. So although they're at the back, although they're kind of behind the pace of everyone, they're collecting data every race, they're developing, they're improving. And although we might not see the improvements in that Williams this season too much, I mean, they might get a little bit more competitive towards the end of the season, but it might be too much. But, well, they'll be hoping, and we're all hoping probably as F1 fans, that the data that they collect next year for that last season before the big rule changes in 2021, this season's been a really good kind of grounding block to kind of push on and be more competitive next year. But we will see. McLaren have shown that you can go from near in the back of the field back into being competitive in that midfield. So Haas, guys, to round off, it's a really bad situation. It's really bad. I may be exaggerating. Obviously, there are few good race performances away from it not being all doom and gloom. But just the whole atmosphere around things, I think people are getting frustrated and feeling dejected. They need to sort things quickly, because no one likes to see a team struggle in F1. And the guys within F1 and the engineers and stuff, everyone works so hard for that kind of pinnacle of the race to kind of perform in. And it's tough, F1, and it's just not right at the moment. But they're not helping themselves, and in particular the drivers aren't helping the team enough, probably. Maybe I'm being a little bit harsh on both of them, but especially it's probably with fresh in the mind of the British Grand Prix. That is just so poor for the team. But they need to brush themselves off, and only the rest of the season will tell whether they can climb out this hole they're in. It'll be interesting to see, guys. It'll be interesting to see. It's been really poor first half of the season. Obviously, they've got that 3-week break coming up after the next 2 races. Can they have a strong finish? Because they desperately need it. Desperately need it. So yeah, guys, I hope you've enjoyed the slightly different video today, kind of having a question and a look at something within the sport that's interesting to see what's happened. If you like what we do, give us a thumbs up on the video. Comment on your thoughts on Haas, on kind of your thoughts on the issues they're having, whether you think they can get out of this issue. Yeah, guys, let us know, and we're going to keep uploading videos. Our next video coming up is a look back at Frank Williams' 50 years as a team principal in F1, which is going to come out on Friday. So guys, look forward to seeing you then. Subscribe to the channel. Enjoy, guys. Have a good evening. See you later. Bye.